It is a big world out there. There's a universe of people. So get out there. The best entrepreneurs, the best founders build and maintain and grow relationships, meet people, and overcome the awkwardness.
You created the most successful networking group for women. What would you say is the key to your success? What would you say is the key to making a group like that?
I think, again, it's the people you surround yourself with and finding complementary skill sets. I could not push you more to find somebody who did not take your classes, who did not learn what you learned, and try to find somebody with that cognitive diversity. A founder, an executive, a business leader, your job becomes...
Welcome back to 30 Years in 30 Minutes. I'm your host, Michael Oved, and we've got a great episode for you today. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you today's guest. Lindsay Kaplan is an American entrepreneur, business leader, and investor who's the co-founder of Chief, the premier network for executive women. She grew to be worth over $1 billion. Under her leadership, Chief was named one of Time's 100 most influential companies and Fast Company's most innovative companies. Today, Lindsay serves on Chief's board of directors. Before Chief, Lindsay was vice president at Casper, a now publicly traded e-commerce company that sells sleep products online and in retail stores, where she grew the company from a small startup to an e-commerce behemoth. Beyond Chief, Lindsay is an investment partner at Next Wave NYC, where she invests in early-stage companies including Riley, Loop, and Neptune. Lindsay's been recognized with several honors, including being named an Ad Age Leading Woman, Crane's 40 Under 40, and one of Inc. magazine's most dynamic female founders. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Lindsay, tell us a bit more about what you were like in high school. What in your high school years best prepared you for your entrepreneurial career?
It's a good question. I think that I have always been an untraditional student, learner, and a bit of a weirdo. And I think entrepreneurs are often people who don't really like being told what to do, who like to march to the beat of their own drum. And I think the type of entrepreneur I am, which is more of a creative, it makes a lot of sense that I threw myself into the classes that I really liked and did the bare minimum of the classes I wasn't really inspired by. And so now looking back at high school, yes, I think it was, in the context of entrepreneurship, made a lot of sense, the way that I kind of approached being a student.
What were the classes that you liked?
A thread that has run throughout my life and my career has been my love of reading and writing. I'm a storyteller. I think it is one of the most invaluable aspects of being a founder, entrepreneur, and business person, is being able and competent to tell a really compelling story. And I loved English. I loved history. I liked math. I liked science. I'm not somebody that likes to check my work. I'm not somebody that kind of just wants to sit there and do math problems all day. So I would get the idea and then try to just be done with the test as quickly as possible. I have a distinct memory of, in my SATs, I graduated high school in 2002. And so some people did SAT prep classes, but it certainly wasn't something I had signed up for in my public school, high school experience. And I remember sitting through the SATs and I was the first person done. And I didn't check my work. I just slammed my pencil down on the table and was like, peace, and walked out of the gymnasium. And so I'm somebody that just again, and I ended up getting nearly perfect score on verbal and then just not great on math. Had I checked my work, maybe I would have done a little bit better. I do think about the type of executive and entrepreneur I am. I think there is a myth that you have to be good at everything, and you really don't. You need to figure out what you are great at, what you excel at, what gives you intellectual satisfaction, and then you surround yourselves with other people that are bringing their superpowers to the table. And so my superpower is not math. My superpower is storytelling.
So you discovered very early on what your superpower is. A lot of people don't know what their superpower is until much later in their careers. How would you advise high schoolers and college students to better understand what their own superpowers are?
So I don't know if I knew at 18 I was a great storyteller. What I did know is what I liked and what I didn't like. And so I continued to pursue the arts. So I painted. I took music theory. I was a real liberal arts nerd. And that kind of pushed me in the direction where I would figure out what lights me up and where I was best and using my talents. So I don't necessarily think you need to hone in on a superpower when you are young, when you are in college. I do think continuing to strive towards the direction of what's giving you both inspiration, excitement, but also intellectual satisfaction, which is something we don't talk a lot about at our jobs. We don't talk about the fact that I am intellectually satisfied from most of the work I do. That is something that will continue to fuel you because you will be so much better at what you do. You will find so much more success if you can find that intellectual satisfaction.
And how did that continue when you were in college? What did you do to further that interest?
I knew that I was an artsy nerd. I went to Brandeis outside Boston, and I pursued a double major in creative writing and English lit. And I have to tell you, I was not the greatest student. I just knew myself. I was not going to any class that was before 11 a.m. I realized I was a big night owl. I realized that I was in college both to pursue my academic rigor, but also to make friends and figure out who I was, like not to get too mushy about it. And so I think the years between 18 and 22 are not just about figuring out your major and performing. You have an entire life ahead of you to perform. You also have to figure out who you are. You have to go on some existential journey, whether that is something you can do with friends, whether that's a trip, whether that is becoming an autodidact and reading what it takes for you to cross some of those intellectual bridges. Hopefully that doesn't need to be drug fueled, but I think that is the age where you need to figure out some self-discovery. And so, yeah, I majored in creative writing, helpful for me to be in writing workshops. I'm not the world's best novelist. I did not end up writing the great American novel, which I had pursued when I was 20, much to my college roommates' dismay. But I did figure out a lot of who I was as a person. And I think when you were that age, and I would heed the advice of, it's not just about performance, it's discovering who you are. Because especially when you are at an academically intense university, you will be around other people who are just as smart, just as focused, just as driven as you. And so if you are continuing to base who you are on your success and those metrics and performance in your grades, you're never going to actually figure out, again, like what makes you unique, what makes you special, and what's going to give you that satisfaction to really dig in deep and figure out the next chapter of your life.
And how did you figure out who you were in college?
I'm not allowed to say drugs. But I did read a lot. I think I met a lot of new people. I'm from a very small town in upstate New York. And so I think being around very different people, having like ridiculous late night intellectual conversations, being uncomfortable, putting myself in very weird and different situations with weird new people certainly helped me determine who I was. And I think, again, between 18 and 22, but even beyond that, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, trying new things, it's a bit like exercising. Like you have to like break muscle to create new muscle, right? I don't exercise a lot. It's a terrible analogy for me if you saw me in my noodle arms. But I think having new experiences and making yourself uncomfortable is what will lead you to finding who you are. And realizing that nobody really cares much about anything else except themselves. And so you have your own journey to go on to figure out who you are and what makes you tick.
Did you have a point in your college career when you realized that you wanted to pursue entrepreneurship, or did you only decide that much later?
No, I definitely thought I was going to write the great American novel. I had a pen name because no one's writing a novel and believing that the great American novel is going to come from a Lindsay. It didn't fit. My pen name was actually Richard, which is ironic because I ended up marrying a guy named Richard, unrelated. But I really wanted to be a writer. I saw myself as moving to New York City, becoming a journalist, potentially being in publishing and writing a novel. And there's still time. I can still do that. But I'm glad that I didn't know that I was on a path towards entrepreneurship yet, because again, it helped me. I think when somebody is on a track towards business, there is a single-mindedness towards only learning about business and not understanding the psychology of the way humans work, not understanding necessarily your superpowers along the way. Business is made up of all of these different skills and functions and roles. And so I encourage people who are business majors, econ majors, to also branch out and find passion and find, again, things that light them up beyond the actual technical aspect of business. And so I'm glad that I pursued writing, even though I did not become yet a great American writer. It did help me hone a lot of the skills that would later show up in my entrepreneurial journey.
And even when you graduated college, you went into that field. You were a publicist, graduated college, correct?
I did. Well, I graduated, moved to New York City, and I ended up working in book publishing because I didn't know anything else. I was an English major. That made sense. And my first interview, I was down in New York City. I had no idea what I was doing. I had put on some like stuffy suit because that's what I thought you needed to do. And the guy that I interviewed with was like, okay, there's two jobs open. There's this editorial assistant position. And I was like, great, sign me up. I want to be an editor. I was a writer. So, yeah, there's that. The other job is publicity, which I didn't even know what that was. And I was like, cool, I'm really not into that. I would like to be an editor. I would like to be a writer. Therefore, sign me up for editorial assistant. And this guy, Christian Purdy, he looked at me and he was like, I don't know, dude, you talk a lot. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, if you become an editorial assistant, you're going to sit in a cube all day and you're not talking to anyone. You are just in it. You are in it all day. And it's so boring. Are you sure you want to do that? And I immediately was like, I don't know. I do talk a lot. Like I talk a lot. And I didn't even really understand what publicity or marketing truly was. Again, I was a nerd that ended up doing creative writing workshops most of my college career. So I ended up being convinced to take that publicity assistant job by virtue of the fact that sitting in a cubicle all day and night with a stack of papers sounded like hell on earth to me. And that job was probably the jump off point to me, again, learning that idea of writing, that idea of storytelling didn't necessarily mean I had to be the one writing a novel and writing a piece of fiction, but that storytelling was a huge piece of business. And so I ended up becoming a publicity associate at Oxford University Press. I remember my job was to promote the dictionary. Super fun. The word of the year in 2007 was carbon neutral, and nobody knew what that was, which means I did do a great job. But now we all know what carbon neutral was. It was a really big buzzword in 2007. And he was right. I talk a lot. And so that storytelling also became how am I storytelling about writing, about other things, and how do I get people interested and thinking about topics outside of just actually writing my own fiction?
But my question really is, what is the art of storytelling? Right? The way that you market the dictionary, what you learned when you were publicizing the dictionary, I'm sure plays a very important role in the art of storytelling. So how did you publicize the dictionary?
How does one get the dictionary? So it wasn't just the dictionary. I also worked on a lot of nonfiction books. And when I got there, there was a way of working. So I think as most young professionals, you enter your first job, internship, whatever it is, somebody above you shows you this is what we do here, right? Here's like the rigmarole of what we do. And so you have to write a press release, then you email people the press release, you send them a free book called the galley, and then you sit around and wait and maybe you follow up. And that's what I learned the first 6 months to a year. And I quickly realized, God, that's so boring. It's so boring to do that. And for me, it became a lesson of I hate doing what everybody else does. Because I have a saying, I know this sounds really goofy, Michael, but never bring a kazoo to a parade. Meaning if everybody else is doing something, you are going to get drowned out, particularly if you have no budget because you have a kazoo. That's the kazoo part of the analogy. And so you have to do things differently. So first of all, don't show up to the parade because if everybody else is doing it, you will never get noticed. It is really hard to pop if you are doing a Super Bowl commercial because everybody else is doing a Super Bowl commercial, right? If you are trying to be an Instagram influencer and do fashion, everybody else who's into fashion is going to be on Instagram, right? So what can you do differently? And how do you gain attention in ways that I think are, and this harkens back to me being a weirdo in high school, but how do you think differently? How can you understand the psychology of what everybody else is doing and zig when people zag? And so that was one of the big first learnings I took from book publishing, which was, again, those steps of here's what we do here, and just looking around at everybody wearing a suit and thinking like, I know this sounds crazy, but what if we don't do that and try something new? And at big corporations, a lot of folks, you come in, and I think a lot of people have these ideas of, I can mix things up, we could do things differently. And it's hard to do that in giant organizations, especially ones that have hundreds of years of history, like Oxford University Press, which is why I wasn't there for that long because I think I was itchy and young and had a lot of spark and wanted to try new things. And so I left Oxford after around 2 years and I went into magazines. So my next job was at a weekly magazine called Time Out New York, which was, it's not really a thing these days, but back in the aughts, it was, nobody was really using the internet to figure out what to do downtown. And so that was just like a 20 something hot pot of excitement and New York buzz and activity. And so instead of looking at something that was on a multi-year cadence of publishing a book, I had whiplash going to a weekly magazine and being able to try out new things, be weird, be crazy. And this was around the time that social media was starting to be born. Nobody had even, I don't think most people at this point were even on Facebook. And so it was a fun time for me to both try new things while new platforms were coming into the mainstream.
I just want to harp on what you said before about your time in Oxford. You got to zig when everyone else zags. You got to zag when everyone else zigs. When you were at Oxford and later when you went to Casper,
Yeah.
what did you do differently that set yourself apart from everyone else?
So there wasn't a lot of room for me to do things differently at Oxford. There's not a lot you can do with the dictionary when you're a 23-year-old and you don't really understand the way how business works and how the world works yet. When I went to Time Out, there was a lot more rope for me to try new things. And when you have all that rope, you might hang yourself, but you get a lot of rope if you're at a younger, more startup environment. And so the biggest thing that I did was go into social media. So I'm really dating myself, but Foursquare was this was this new social platform. I wanted to put Time Out New York on Foursquare. I wanted to put Time Out New York on Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, all of these platforms that nobody had even really heard of. Like I think most people had heard of Facebook. Their younger nieces and nephews were on Facebook, but brands were not yet on social media. So that was the big zig I wanted to take, which was not just trying to get Time Out New York to be known in the traditional way, but to try to appeal to a younger group of folks by putting a brand and putting a publisher on social media for the first time.
It was probably that interest and the skills you developed while there that you later took to Casper. How did you make the transition there?
So I stayed in magazines for a couple of years, did a stint at a advertising agency, which was ridiculous because I was like the only social media person there. They would trot me out to a meeting and be like, we hired a kid to do social media. And they would trot me out to the most ridiculous clients from Cheerios to Cartier, right? And people didn't know what they were doing on social media. And so by the time I met the guys, the founders of Casper, I'd worked with a bunch of brands and people were willing to take chances, but none of that was my brand. And so when I met the guys from Casper, I fell in love with this idea of mattresses are one of the most cringy of all types of companies you could work for. The only mattresses that I had even known were like Sealy, Serta, and Tempur-Pedic. And it just felt like the grossest type of company. And that was exciting for me because nobody had made anything about mattresses remotely interesting. The bar was so low. The bar was on the ground. I could do little to nothing and probably find success by taking a mattress and making it like remotely like a teeny bit more interesting to young people. And so what was fascinating about taking that role was I got to work with the co-founders to actually develop what that brand was and do very weird things. So that mattress had God, I'm really dating myself, but brands weren't really on social media the way they're on now. Like you look at the Duolingo account on TikTok and it is weird and bizarre and it died and now it's back. And Casper went on Twitter and it was just like a self-aware tweeting mattress, which at the time was a very big deal. It won a bunch of Webby and Shorty awards. We had Casper doing very weird, bizarre things. And again, the bar was low, but it gave us the ability to experiment and be wacky and drive attention. And I think there was a realization for us that the attention that Casper was getting was building not just, oh, I've heard of Casper, but building, which is what we call in marketing, the awareness, but this love and affection. And I hate to use the word community, but it certainly was developing this type of person who related weirdly to that brand wanted to recommend it to their friends, and almost felt camaraderie with that brand.
So, the early pioneers of social media marketing.
I believe so. Yeah, weirdly. No one's ever said that, but yes, I was one of the first people to put brands on social media. Yes.
If you were to look at the way people market on social media today, what would you tell them to do if they wanted to maximize what they do on social media?
I love that question. So I am squarely now a millennial, and I think millennials in particular carry a weight of fear of what they are posting that Gen Zs don't. So what I've seen is that Gen Z is so much more comfortable just posting as much as they want. I guess my advice is just continue to post and just continue to get things up and don't overproduce it. And I have felt this way for years. And I think a lot of millennial brands went way too high production, perfect photos. And what I loved about developing Casper is it very much felt like this authentic, as much as you can be for a sleep company and a mattress, but this like weird experimental warts and all, let's just throw things against the wall and see what sticks. And we did a lot of weird things at Casper. And I often think about our bets as lotto tickets. You have to try a lot of stuff because most things won't pay off. You have to throw stuff at the wall. And you have to understand that, I don't know, you try 50 things, 49 of them won't work. But that 50th weird thing, whether it's the algorithm, whether it's just like really a great idea, whether it just caught on because the timing was right, whatever that is, because you'll never know that magic science mix of why things take off the way they do. You have to keep trying and striving and getting things out there for you to see one of your efforts pay off. So my biggest advice is just keep going. And then also, if it's not working, just change. But I see people who have TikTok accounts and it's just like pages and pages of them staring at a camera with no engagement. And it's not working. Try something else. Be weird. I don't know what your brand of weird is, but people are bored and everybody becomes the same. And the internet's actually gotten weirdly homogenized. And so I go back to the zig and zag of if it's not working and you've been zigging for the last month, you have to try zagging and you have to try something new and see what sticks.
But when do you know when to zag? When is that moment?
Ooh, if things aren't working and no one's picking up on it, just continuing. I think this also goes back to the type of entrepreneur I am, which is I really like blowing things up. I don't like being comfortable. I think being comfortable is boring. And so you should know if things aren't working, if engagement isn't going up, if you're seeing things either decline or stay the same, you need to try something new. And what a piece of life advice, right? Like, get out of your shell. If you are doing the same thing day to day, if you were taking the same classes, if you were hanging out with the same people every day, try something new. Be weird. Try something different. Go on a trip, go on a road trip, do something weird. Try something new. Your life is very short. Go and do something weird and live a little. I promise you nothing bad's going to happen.
When I think about living a little, when I think about the role that you had when you were at Casper and why you got it, it's tremendous. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I have worked at a few no-name startups prior to Casper. They just had really bad product market fit, great founders, just a lot of startups don't go anywhere, right? Like they don't have enough funding or the timing isn't right. And so I was about to burn out and go to business school and get an MBA because I was just feeling a little bit untethered and lost. And I got a cold email from the founders of Casper on LinkedIn. I got some random note from LinkedIn that was like, oh, I have a mattress startup. Can we talk about it? And that conversation changed my life because it stopped me from applying for business school. It reignited that inspiration, that intellectual satisfaction of taking something boring and trying new things and experimenting. And those there were 5 founders of Casper who were all younger than me. They were awesome guys who were phenomenal founders in the sense that they sought out great talent and were not afraid to experiment and take chances on both people like me and the crazy ideas that people like me had and brought to the table.
Other than that, what do you think enabled the company to be as successful as it was?
I think there were some real tailwinds in the market. D2C was blowing up. There was a lot of VC investment at the time. So I think it was both a phenomenal brand. First of all, it was a great product. So I have worked again at a lot of companies. You can have a great brand. If your product sucks, the brand can only take you so far, right? So the actual Casper mattress back in the day, like that mattress was and continues to, I still sleep on all Casper mattresses, but it was a great product. So baseline foundation is your product needs to be solid. It does not have to be a groundbreaking piece of technology, by the way. I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs who think, I have to invent something new. You don't have to invent something new. You just have to take something really good and make it and make it a little bit better. And for Casper, people had sold a bed in a box before. There were foam mattresses on the market, but they developed something that was really good. It was a good product. They found a new audience for that product, which was millennials who were wanting to buy things online. We developed a phenomenal brand that just cut through the noise because how on earth do you get mattresses in the zeitgeist of millennial culture? We did that. And then I think it was just like the right market at the time. VC money was flowing into D2C. Interest rates were very low, and there was a lot of frothiness in the market that allowed Casper to grow more than it could probably today.
After Casper grew tremendously, when did you know it was the right time to move?
So I loved my journey at Casper. It was career changing, life changing. I was there for over 4 years. And at that point, the company had grown to 600 people. I mean, you have to remember when I started, it was like 6 of us in a room. And although I came into Casper with the title VP, I was not a VP. There were 6 of us, right? Sure. They were like, yeah, Lindsay, sure, you can be vice president of our 6-person company. Like it's complete garbage, meaningless. By the time I left, I really was vice president. I had an actual team and budget and department. And with that comes just corporate stuff. And I found myself being there were really progressive people at Casper, but I still had like the weight of being one of the few female executives. I had 40 women constantly asking me, can I have some advice? Can we go get coffee? Can I pick your brain? Which felt like an entirely other job on top of the job of being a comms and branding executive. And I felt like I was ready for a new adventure. I built that brand. And now I had a team of people who were doing the tweeting, who were doing all of the social media. And I was really functioning more as an executive than a creative. And that's when I knew I was ready for something that could light me up again. So I met my co-founder who had started thinking about an idea for a women's executive network. And 2 things really stood out to me. 1, I just personally related to that as a woman executive. And 2, like mattresses, holy shit, that is the most boring thing I could possibly think of, right? Like I told you mattresses made me cringe. Guess what else made me cringe? Women's executive network. Ugh, ugh. It like gives me hives. I don't want to be founder of a women's executive network. I want to be like a tech founder. That's so lame. Not that women's executive networks are not needed and important as are mattresses, but no one's lighting up and excited about that, which for me was like another challenge. The bar is so low, right? So when I got together with my co-founder, she comes from a phenomenal biz ops background. She has her MBA from HBS. She had started her career in investment banking. She had grown up to be through the world of biz ops, a real COO type of CEO. She is a phenomenal business leader. And I'm creative. I'm a weirdo. I have a lot of vision and storytelling, and you can glean that from me that I'm not going to be sitting in front of a bunch of spreadsheets all day. And we had really great shared values. And so as we talked about this idea that would become Chief, I was both ready to move on. I found a business partner who I thought was a phenomenal complement to my skill set. And I found this challenge of building something that once again felt cringy and boring into something that could be dynamic and interesting and cool.
And what lessons did you learn from Casper that you took with you in this new endeavor?
I don't know. I'll say this. I don't think I gave the founders enough credit for how hard it is to be a founder. Because again, I joined so early. I almost fancied myself like a founder. And I don't think I had yet fully understood what it is like to raise a round of funding, to be on a board, manage those relationships, make decisions that are going to affect all of your employees. So I don't think yet I even had the understanding of the learnings that that I was taking from there. And I think I had, if anything, a chip on my shoulder and a burning desire to say, if they were a founder, and I joined so early that I felt this real competitive spark to say, if you could be founder, like I can be founder. And that honestly, that's probably what I took with me the most was a burning desire to just prove myself.
So you had that burning desire, you had that co-founder. What were the
Yeah.
initial challenges you faced when you were building Chief?
I had to raise money to do so. So we needed to raise some capital. And typically, if you're raising early stage, we also had the naivete of thinking like, oh, we've both been in startups for a while. She and I have these kind of like great resumes. We know VCs. We know some of them. It won't be hard. Michael, when I tell you the amount of no's we had, it was really depressing. 30, 40, 50 no's in a row. And you start going through the same, you almost go on autopilot, just waiting for the rejection to come in. And when I look back at our early seed deck, we didn't change much. I think what we could have done was taken every piece of feedback and made significant changes to what we wanted our business to be. But the biggest challenge was finding the right investors who understood our vision, who understood who we were as founders, and wanted to take that ride with us. That was absolutely the biggest challenge.
And how do you know who the right investor is for you?
They say yes. Looking back at the folks who joined the table at Chief, I think we have some of the greatest people we absolutely could have even dreamt of joining our board. Primary VC in New York City, Jesse Middleton from Flybridge, who was very early at WeWork and just understood the community dynamics we were trying to grow. At our Series A, Ken Chenault joined our board. Ken Chenault is the former CEO, chairman of American Express. Nobody understands membership like Ken Chenault and building a premium product. We're just really lucky to be bringing in people with surrounding ourselves with people with different superpowers who could help us get to the next level.
Now, you spoke a little bit about how the people you surround yourself with should complement your own traits. And alongside your co-founder, you created the most successful networking group for women. What would you say is the key to your success? What would you say is the key to making a group like that?
I think, again, it's the people you surround yourself with and finding complementary skill sets. I've seen a lot of people leave business school, leave college, and find somebody in their program. So they are literally finding a classmate who sat in all the same classes as them, and they want to launch a business together. I could not push you more to find somebody who did not take your classes, who did not learn what you learned, and try to find somebody with that cognitive diversity. And I don't mean, okay, then go find somebody from Wharton. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying go find somebody who is bringing a completely different superpower and a completely different way of thinking to the table.
Now, taking a step back from Chief and looking at your career as a whole, based on all of your experiences, all of your successes, all of your failures, if you were speaking to a high school or college student right now, what would you tell them to best prepare them to be a successful entrepreneur?
So two things. The first is, I think, again, getting really comfortable with storytelling. A founder, an executive, a business leader, your job becomes being a narrator. You are now responsible for sharing the vision of the business to both stakeholders, meaning your customers, your shareholders, your investors, your employees, your future employers. That is building a narrative, getting passion around it, and articulating vision. Again, whether you are a CMO, a creative type like me, or even if you are a head of data and you want to put your head in those spreadsheets, the more success you will find is directly correlated to how well you can articulate and tell a story about what you do and how it impacts your business and beyond. So that's the first piece of advice. The second is relationship building. It is a big world out there. There's a universe of people, and the best entrepreneurs, the best founders build and maintain and grow relationships. So get out there, go to networking events, get uncomfortable, show up at places without a +1, and just meet people and overcome the awkwardness. There is a lot of awkwardness in life. And if you let that hamper you, you are going to not go as far as you possibly could if you just overcome that feeling of wanting to stay home.
And our last question before the rapid fire questions is, what is the art of storytelling?
What is the art of storytelling? Michael, that could be a whole other podcast. The art of storytelling. I think you're doing it. I think it is getting to the root of what people actually care about. And I think people often conflate, I'll just tell you about my product. It's why your product matters to me and why I should care and why somebody should give a shit. And again, that's whether you're a VP of data trying to articulate why the work you've done matters, or whether you are a founder trying to raise $1 billion round of funding. You have to be able to articulate to people why it matters.
Not the why, it's the what.
Exactly.
Now on to the rapid fire questions. Super quick answers. I have 5 questions for you. Ready?
Okay. I'm unprepared. Yes.
What is a quote that you live by?
I have none. I forget them immediately. Love a quote, see it, and then I immediately forget.
What book do you recommend?
I love fiction, but I will say for business books, I love Only the Paranoid Survive by Andy Grove.
What is your biggest regret?
I have none.
Love that. What has been the key to your success?
Relationships.
And the last question is, how do you overcome the awkwardness of conversation?
Nobody cares. Everybody's so worried about themselves. This conversation could have been really awkward, right? Nobody cares. Congratulations to any of the listeners who made it to the end. We are so frighteningly worried about what people think about us. And at the end of the day, people go back home and think about themselves only. So don't worry about it. Nobody remembers, and just keep focusing on building interesting experiences and relationships.
Lindsay, this is awesome. You are amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael. This was fun.
Thank you for listening to 30 Years in 30 Minutes. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments if there's anyone else you want to hear from.